Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello, and welcome back to a very special edition of Out with Dan. Today, I am excited to be joined again by Phillip Gambone to talk about Zigzag, his latest collection of short stories. Phil's first collection of short stories, the language we use up here, was a Lambda Literary Award nominee. And Phil taught high school English for over 40 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And you've taught English, or you've taught writing classes at UMass, Boston College, and Harvard. So that's
correct.
That's a pretty good group of schools there, Phil. So I was talking all over your showing the book. Will you hold the book up again, Phil?
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you. I love the cover on it.
Thank you. I love the cover too. So my publisher, Rattling Good Yarns Press, great press to work with. And we worked for a long time on this cover. I don't think it's a secret to say that it's actually AI generated. A real artist did not do this, but I'm kind of impressed that Mr. AI or Miss AI completely got what the book is about. The background is Boston, and the guys on the cover are all older gay men of varying backgrounds and varying ethnicities and racial makeup. And that's exactly what the book is about.
I love it. Will you give the audience an overview of what the book is about and why this particular book?
Sure. So the first book of short stories that I published, The Language We Use Up Here, I wrote when I was, I guess, in my 30s. And so it focuses on gay men who are much younger, in their 20s and 30s, and the particular challenges that they were undergoing. When I came to think about writing this new book, I was much older, and it seemed to me, Dan, that older gay men are not particularly well represented in literature. Mm-hmm. I will add quickly, the exceptions being Andrew Holleran and Edmund White, who just passed away, who both have written beautifully about older gay men. But most people who are writing today, most LGBTQ people who are writing today, are not really focused on older gay men. So the task I set for myself was to present a collection of stories that focused on the lives, the challenges, the romances, the heartbreaks, the sorrows of that particular constellation of gay men. All of the stories take place in Boston, which is where I live, and it's a city that I love. And I hope that I succeeded in showing that even within this very narrow slice of life, older gay men in Boston, there's a lot of diversity and a lot of different kinds of stories.
And I love that. It was definitely a love story to the city of Boston with an enormous cast of characters who run the gamut from A to Z. Every emotion is represented at some point in these short stories. So I was thinking about Boston. I particularly love Boston. I think it's a required city for every American to visit, and lots of people that aren't American should visit it as well. So do you look at Boston as being a large city, a medium city, a collection of neighborhoods? How do you personally view Boston, having lived?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's a medium-sized city. It's a very, the cliche is to say it's a livable city, but it is a livable city. It is a city of neighborhoods, and I tried very deliberately in the book to make sure that as many neighborhoods in Boston as possible were covered. Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, the South End, the North End, Roslindale, so Roxbury. So that was a conscious decision as well. And thank you for saying what you did. It is kind of a love letter to Boston. I hope I wasn't overly sappy about that.
No, I didn't think so at all. I mean, look, it's, you know, if this collection of short stories was set in New Orleans, I would expect you to love the city of New Orleans. New Orleans is a great city. Once again, a place everyone should visit at least once, but it also has its problems. No city is without a problem because humans inhabit those cities. So you've got some sides of Boston that are prettier than others. I mean, 30 years ago, living in South Boston, you might be taking your life in your hands.
That's right.
Now you go to South Boston and it's yuppie and it's grown up and it's beautiful and it's vibrant and exciting. But a city changes, and that, of course, is one of the things in one of your stories that you bring out as well, because two of the guys reminisce about how the neighborhood used to be when they first got there. And you know, I think as a human race, we talk about gentrification as if it's such a horrible thing, but I look at it as it's a rebuilding of what's already there. You build anew on top of the old bones, the old foundations. I'm not sure gentrification, except for the exorbitant prices, is a bad thing. If you take a neighborhood and redo it, that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's a story often told that the neighborhood that I live in, and that is featured in several of the stories, the South End, was more or less gentrified by gay men who came in the 60s and 70s and bought up old brownstones and townhouses and fixed them up. Now you wouldn't, I think, even describe the South End as a gay neighborhood anymore. Mm-hmm. It's now been embraced by many different constituencies.
So I'm going to ask a very personal question, because I think this question begs to be asked because of the tone in some of the stories. Do you feel that your life was what you thought it would be when you were younger? I mean, someone who taught English for more than 40 years, I'm assuming at a fairly young age, you decided you wanted to be a teacher. So did your life go the way you thought it would go?
Dan, I fell into teaching. I got to the second semester of my senior year in college, and I thought, oops, I'm going to be leaving this place in a few months, and I need a job. And fortunately, I majored in English, which is, I think, a major that allows you to entree into many different realms and fields. I decided, sure, let's give teaching a try. I got a job at a private school in Kansas City, and Topeka feature in one of the stories as well. And I want to talk about that in a minute too. But I went thinking I would stay for a year. I thought, I was the sort of New England snob who thought the rest of the country had nothing to show me. And I fell in love with the city and ended up staying 4 years.
All right.
And falling in love with teaching. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing my first year of teaching, but you kind of learn it as you go along. So to answer your question, I've never had a life plan, Dan. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but in one sense, it's saved me from heartbreak and regret because I didn't have long-range plans. I kind of have always gone with the flow. Although I would say, I guess one long-range plan was to become a writer.
Okay.
But certainly by the time I got to college, I wanted to be a writer. And at first I wanted to be a poet. And the world is a much happier place for my not having become a poet. I wasn't a very good poet, but poetry at least taught me how to use language very economically. And I hope that shows up in the
Yeah.
story.
Yes, I think I agree with you, Phil. I think that poetry sort of lends itself to writing short stories as well, because you do have an economy of words. In a short story, you can't run on and on and on and on because
Right.
it's a short story. So you get a sense of using the right word when it's needed in the right place.
But I will tell you a funny story about economy, Dan. In writing this second collection of stories about older gay men, I very early on realized that older people in general have long backstories, and that those backstories often help to explain who they are now. So the stories in Zigzag are on average twice as long as the stories in my first collection, the language we use up here, because I, as a writer, my narrators are often hearkening back to what happened to these men earlier on in their lives. So yes, economy of language, but at the same time, much longer stories.
Well, and I think you have to do that because we don't really understand one character's anger or one character's joy unless we have a backstory to go along with it.
Absolutely.
So you do give us a wide range of characters, but you also give us a wide range of emotions, which I thought was a very brilliant thing to do on your part, because as we age, each of us approaches that aging process differently. Some of us are happy, some of us are sad. I love
I just lost you for a
Yeah,
minute.
there we go. Yeah, it blinked off and blinked back on. A poltergeist. I guess that the Council on Aging is trying to stop us this morning. So you had a character named Michael who is younger, and he even shaved years off of his younger life. And I found that to be humorous because for many years, I had my birthday exactly down pat 10 years younger than I currently am. And I mean, I did that for years. And I have a friend that still does it. And I'm like, dude, you really should be aging up at this point. You should tell people you're 80 so they'll say, oh, look how good you look. Because no one believes you're still 38. No one. So how do you feel about aging and
Yeah.
approaching an older age?
Well, we were talking about this before we went on the air, and I was saying that I have a range of friends in their 70s and 80s, and one who is 91, couple who are 91 actually, and they run the gamut in terms of their attitude towards their age. So, in fact, my two 91-year-old friends, Austin and George, both are still so active, so alive, so engaged with life, with creativity. And I have friends, I just had coffee with a friend yesterday in his mid 70s, and he's depressed because he says I'm now dealing with the final phase of my life. Um, I I tend to fall with the first category. Yes, I'm aware of mortality. Yes, I'm aware that the years are running down, but I I want to live as fully as possible, and I still want to have adventures, and
Sure.
and I think the characters in my book run that gamut too, from some who are really freaked out about their age to others. And again, I have a character, I think the oldest characters in the book are in their mid 80s, who are still vibrant and alive. So again, I didn't want to whitewash the situation, and I didn't want to shoehorn all of my characters into one reaction.
Well, and I
Old age.
appreciate that. I do appreciate that too, because I think that what you've done is you've mirrored reality. I mean, in one of the short stories, one of the younger guys adopts a baby, and one of his friends has a really difficult time with
Yep.
that because David feels like he's being replaced. And I think it's a fair emotion, but I also think it's a very selfish emotion because so I've often said that, any adult who competes with a child is a fool. The child always wins. There's no adult who's ever won a battle against a child. And the crowd will turn against you if you try to, take on a child as your competitor. I did understand where David came from because there have been situations in my life where I felt left behind.
Yep.
And if you're not careful, you do become bitter about it.
Absolutely. And he has, as you say, he has a really difficult time accepting the fact that his friend not only adopts a child, but then also finds a partner. And the trajectory of the story is toward David's coming to peace with all of that.
Yes. And I won't try to pronounce her name, but the Lebanese woman who owns the cafe that they go to often, she has such a brilliant outlook on life because she says to David, you have to start over. That's what life is about. And it really is about that. One other thing we talked about briefly before we started recording was I want to talk about replacement. I mean, there are things I can't do at 62 that I could do at 25. It is just a fact of life. So what I do is to keep myself happy rather than dwell on the things I cannot do. I find lots of things to fill in the spaces where, maybe I used to could stand on my head. That never happened, just so we're clear, but let's say it did. And now I can no longer stand on my head. So I go to yoga and I learn to do different poses. You find ways if you're wise, and I guess I'm about to pat myself on the back here for a second, but I think that you make allowances for where you are in your life, but you try to keep things on the positive end. Because
Right.
we're all going through some stuff. Every human is going through some stuff. Every day of the year, somebody's going through something.
Absolutely. And one of the points of certainly some of the stories is that sometimes my characters by surprise stumble upon new ways of being and looking at themselves. The story Fairy Wedding, for example, this long married couple are invited to a radical fairies wedding out in the country. And their marriage has kind of become stale. And one of the two partners doesn't even want to go to this wedding. He just thinks it's weird. It's too new agey.
Yes.
And he is the one. I don't want to give away too much of the story, but he's the one who I think in the end embraces the exuberance of that wedding and the queerness of that wedding and the life affirming aspect of that wedding, and invites his partner into a dance in the rain that is, I think, a kind of symbol and celebration of a new beginning, of a new way of moving on.
And rain, as a metaphor, is always cleansing. So, and then I think also you give us all, as I said two times before, I mean, you give us such a wide range of characters. You give us in the story with Chris and Mitch and Tyler, you give us a story about, one of the guys who's older. There's a young guy who's attracted to him, and he's not attracted, I think we do have to be careful to keep our eyes open. There are people out there in this world who sees older man with his own place as a cash cow, which can be the case. And then some people who are older with a little bit of cash use that cash to be a cash cow to get what they want. So there is a lot of that. But I loved the blossom of the Chris and Tyler portion of that story.
Thank you.
Because
Yeah.
it was a reminder that we get to live if we choose to live.
Absolutely. Tyler is 19, I think.
Mm-hmm.
and just out of high school, and he works at a local grocery store in the North End, and he's the one who comes on to Christopher, not the other
Yes.
way around. And
Right.
Christopher does his best to parry those overtures, and in the end, and again, I don't want to give away too much of the story, but succumbs, and the result of that liaison, I think, has a kind of surprise twist at the end.
I do too. I do too. And I love, because I mean, once again, as as all humans are, we have a whole bag of emotions, and every person's different in some way. And that's what I saw so often in these stories, you know. And I loved, now I'm gonna forget his name. Let's see if I can find it. Arthur, such a flamboyant queen, just, and I loved that because there again, it is a slice of what we see in everyday life. You know, Arthur is a take no prisoners, but then I loved Lynette because Lynette's like, oh, I don't think so, Queen. You need to back up because I'm not having this. So
Thank
that
you.
was,
You clearly read the book with a lot of intelligence and a lot of attention, Dan, and I really appreciate that.
oh, it's my pleasure, Phil. I just thought it was, you know, so I had a guest recently that we were talking about the subject of aging, and she and I and you are all on the same page. You know, we get to choose which way do you want to age, because aging, if you live, aging is going to happen, and it's how you choose that, you know. And I really do, I see all of these characters in people I know. It's like I see the people who fight against aging and they try everything in their power not to age. I had a client once who had a magazine above her desk that had Angelina Jolie on the cover, and she fancied that she looked like Angelina Jolie. And I was like, you can starve yourself and you can drink 25 gallons of water a day and you're never going to look like Angelina Jolie. I mean, she was literally starving herself to death to try so hard.
Ouch.
And I'm like, the only comparison is you both have dark hair, and I don't think yours is naturally dark. So that was it. So, you know,
You were playing Lynette to her Arthur.
I was, because I was like, I'm not having this. You know, this is ridiculous. So, so do you have, is one story your favorite of all?
Oh gosh.
I mean, that's like asking you, do you like the
Which is my
redheaded child with the
children's
blood?
book,
Right,
yeah.
that's right. I know it's a little unfair.
Well, let me put it this way. I love, very late in the drafting of these stories, as I was beginning to bring characters from one story into another, and your readers will discover that a major character in one story is a minor character in another, a minor character in one story takes on a major role in another. And as I was thinking about how to wrap up the book, I thought a lot of these characters are somehow either involved in the arts or love art. And so the final story takes place at an art opening um, with a painter named Raoul, who is sort of a minor character in another earlier story, and becomes one of the central characters in the final story is called Zigzag. And in that story, which takes place in an art gallery in Dorchester, one of the neighborhoods of Boston, I didn't pull off the trick of bringing characters from every story because that would have seemed a little contrived. But characters from several stories end up at that art opening and interact with each other in some positive ways. And then there's a big blow up at one point. And I love, I'm proud of the fact that I was able to pull that off and also bring in the theme of Zigzag. So in the final moments of the story, the narrator, who is a friend of Raoul's and is helping him run the art opening, recalls that Joan Miro, the surrealist painter, once was asked, how do you account for all of the changes in your style over the years? And Miro said, it may look like a zigzag, but in fact, everything was going toward a central point, a central conclusion. It's all part of who I am. It's not haphazard or scattered or random or zigzaggy. There is kind of a direct line. And I love that as a metaphor, that as full of twists and turns, as full of twists and turns as the lives of gay men are. We've had a lot of twists and turns. We had to go through the AIDS crisis, coming out, the heartbreak of past relationships. At least I feel that it's all part of a whole, and that's what I was finally trying to get at, both in that last story and in the collection, that everything that we have been should be celebrated. Everything that we have been is part of what has made us, I hope, the healthy, older gay men that we are today.
Perfectly summed up, Phil. Perfectly summed up. This collection of short stories, Zigzag, is so heartfelt and so heartwarming. I hope you the very best of success with it.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's always great to talk.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.